And we're back. And the Seahawks are back as well after a 29-3 win over the San Francisco 49ers on Sunday Night Football. Highly anticipated game that really started out kind of ugly, had a 1-hour lightning delay, but then came back. And in the second half, the Seahawks finally were able to pull away from San Francisco thanks to Marshawn Lynch and some really good defense against Colin Kaepernick. This is a recap. That was my transition because I still don't have anyone editing these videos with fancy pictures. Maybe next week. But here's what happened this week. The 49ers and Seahawks, highly anticipated game, as you all know. If you're watching this video, you're quite the fan. So you already know that what was going on going into the game. Everybody sort of figured that this would be a close one, and it was for much of the game. And Russell Wilson really struggled. He was 3 of 11 or 3 of 12 at one point, although he had 99 yards at that point because the Seahawks, they could really only run it. You know, they would run it for 2 to 5 yards or maybe even -1 yards or whatever, and they would have some really crappy throws, and then they would go for a long bomb and be able to complete it. Like some really interesting, like good play calling, like almost they were being set up on the 49ers defensive side of the ball, and then they would take advantage of it for that one time when they were able to get someone open. But also, you know, some really good, even though Russell Wilson's passes, some of them look pretty shitty, there were also some times when you really realize what's valuable about Russell Wilson, because his ability to elude defenders and keep plays alive is really what helped Seattle win this game. In addition to Marshawn Lynch, who had 3 touchdowns and 135 total yards, he caught a touchdown and ran for 2 more. So a really big game for Marshawn Lynch. He was definitely the offensive MVP. Though I think, you know, Russell Wilson is, you know, he had a good game when he was only 8 of... I'm looking it up. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not looking it up. 8 of 19 for 142 yards, a touchdown and an interception and a fumble. But, you know, I would be, if I was worried about any stuff on offense today, it would be that Russell Okung missed the game. We didn't have Alvin Bailey or Michael Bowie active to replace him, so Paul McQuiston came in, and he settled in eventually, but for the most part looked pretty shitty. So definitely you're going to want to hope that Okung comes back next week. And I'd also be concerned about the fact that Sidney Rice was targeted 5 times. He had 1 catch for 13 yards, and he negated all of that, then some, when he got a personal foul for spinning the ball. So you have to start to wonder how much you're paying Sidney Rice. Well, you don't wonder it. Everybody knows how much Sidney Rice is being paid. But you have to start wondering if he earned that kind of pay. And then I transitioned to defense. And Richard Sherman had a huge game with an interception. This is a fun fact. I don't know if this has ever happened before, but Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, and Earl Thomas each had an interception on Colin Kaepernick. It was Colin Kaepernick's worst game of his career by far, coming ahead of the second worst game of his career, the 42-13 loss to Seattle last season. It was a career low in yards. It was the only time that he had thrown multiple interceptions, and he had 3 of those. Plus, he had a fumble on a Cliff Avril sack. The pass rush looked phenomenal. It was just a matter of the fact that as good as the pass rush looked, Colin Kaepernick is quite amazing at escaping sacks. It's going to be kind of ridiculous to think about what happens next week as they face either Chad Henne or Blaine Gabbert, or maybe even a wild card, because the Jaguars don't have a fucking QB. So, you know, the Jaguars... Here's the thing. Seahawks have allowed 10 points all season long. It's by far the best mark in the NFL. And only Kansas City has allowed 18 points. That's second. And then the next place is 30 points. So they've allowed 20 less points after 2 games, not counting tomorrow's Monday night game. They've allowed 20 fewer points than the third best scoring defense. That's how few points they've allowed. And the 49ers, they just put up a bunch of points against the Packers last week. The Packers just destroyed the Redskins. So they've shut down the Panthers and the 49ers, and it was actually pretty easy to do. They really made the offensive line of San Francisco look pretty mediocre, and this is a team that didn't have Chris Clemens still. You know, Avril and Bennett were playing and were very good. So just to think about what this team could do when they get back Brandon Browner and when they get back Chris Clemens, and on offense when they get back Percy Harvin, and there's somebody else that I'm forgetting at this moment. But the Seahawks, even shorthanded, look great on defense. And next week they're going to play a team that has scored 11 points all year long. It's a funny thing, though, that the Seahawks defense looks better now without Gus Bradley. Not that Gus Bradley was any sort of problem. They look better now without Gus Bradley. Now they're going to face Gus Bradley for the Jaguars that look like possibly the worst team in the NFL right now. Sorry, Gus. It's going to be difficult to see what happens in the future with Seahawks coaches, because this is a really talented team, so obviously they should play well. That's what happened. 29-3. Seahawks take a sole first place lead after the Rams loss. And here we go. This is when we put up the standings. The Seahawks 2-0 take first place. San Francisco and Rams 1-1, and the Cardinals go to 0-2. So Seahawks have quite the nice advantage right now. They look like possibly the best team in the NFL, but there's still a long ways to go. They could still get some. They got to still move on, stay healthy. Hopefully O'Kung is healthy, and they got to just keep moving forward, get some of their own guys back, and just continue to play well. Because let's not forget, not too long ago, that the Seahawks, it was only 12-3 going into the fourth quarter. So, you put up 5 points in the half, struggled for many times against Carolina. So it's easy to get overwhelmed and think, oh wow, this is such a good team when you look at the final score. But in reality, there's still a lot of things to clean up. They could be better. And I guess the fans broke a record of being loud. So good for them. I'm sure that next week at Jacksonville, the Jaguars and Seahawks will break a record of absolutely not a single sound at all from the stands. So we'll see you next week. Perhaps. Good night.